Okay, so welcome to Module 7. On this module, we are going to be focusing on creating triads on the boards in question. I'm going to spend a minute or two on the keyboard, but I'm going to spend most of this module unpacking the fretboard. If you are completely uninterested in learning the fretboard, you should watch anyway, because this will help you make better keyboard music. So looking at page 61 of Module 7, creating triads on the keyboard seems obvious enough, because you can actually see everything laid out. But creating triads on the fretboard is tough. So if you'll see the diagram that we put right there in the middle of the page, this is a version of the one that we've been seeing before that shows us the notes on the fretboard. We see our familiar Eddie 8 Dynamite, Goodbye Eddie, kind of listed across the top. But now it's in a vertical orientation, or portrait for you graphic designers. So now the notes are in the same exact place. Now it's been turned 90 degrees. Everybody, does that make sense, everybody, seeing that diagram? Because some people are going, wow. So we're still using the exact same notes, but from here on out, all fretboard chord diagrams are going to be in a vertical orientation. And in the wild, when you see them printed out, they're almost always in a vertical orientation like this. Okay? So we're going to create an E major chord. Now, at the end of the quiz that we just finished in the prior video, we put some pictures of some chords. The very first one was E major, and the pictures were trying to make an E major chord are E, G sharp, and B. Now, just really quickly over on the keyboard, E, G sharp, and B, no sweat. There's our two black keys. There's the E, a major chord as a minor third, and a major third, and then a minor third above it. E, G sharp, and B, no problem. And because we don't have duplications and everything lays out, I can put my E down here. I can put my B here, my G sharp way over there, and there's the nice little E major voicing. I can also double, and I could do this. Those are all different versions of an E major chord, different voicings, but it's all kind of laid out. And though you might be new to it, it's a lot simpler than our fretboard. So let's go unpack things over at the guitar, and let's build an E major chord on the fretboard. So the notes that we're looking for is E, G sharp, and B, right? Nobody can respond all at the same time because it's really confusing. Everybody wake up, come on. Yes, there we go. E, G sharp, and B. Yes, Mr. Biel is the best answer. Joe gets extra candy next time. Okay? So making an E major chord, we want the notes E, G sharp, and B. Let's make a chord on the fretboard where we're using all the strings. If you've taken guitar lessons, you're going to be like, duh, but pay attention, because this is why the shape they taught you exists. We want the notes E, G sharp, and B. So Eddie 8 Dynamite, so we've got an open E, that works just the way it is, right? E, no problem. The next string A is not part of our chord. It's not a G sharp or a B or an E, so we need to make it one of those. The easiest one to grab a hold of would be a B natural, because the A at the open fret, or the open nut, go up a fret to A sharp. At the second fret is a B natural. So we want to push this string down to make part of our E chord. So we've got a couple of notes going. Okay? And if you're following along, now we're on page 62, and I'm starting at the second paragraph. The next string D, or Dynamite, can be fretted at the second fret also to create an E note. So I've got a D open. I want to get to an E note, right? So I go D, D sharp, E. Here's an E right there at the second fret. We haven't done a G sharp yet. There are G sharps on those strings, but these are the easy ones to grab that are part of the E major chord. So we've got an E, we've got an E fretted here, and we've got an E fretted there. The next string, G, for Eddie 8 Dynamite, Goodbye Eddie, is a G natural. We want a G sharp. How are you going to get that way? One fret up is going to get me G sharp. Boom. I'll fret right there. So now I've got the pattern of this note E, that note E, and this note G sharp. This guy's still open, and the bottom two strings can stay open because they are also by Eddie, B, E. So if I put my fingers in this position, I've got this one here, excuse me. Y'all let me know if the camera's still good. B here, E there, and G sharp there. If I take those three strings and I strum all six, there's an E major chord. Doesn't that sound beautiful? I'll do it again just because it gave me, a nice feeling in the back of my neck. Okay, so when you go to take guitar lessons, one of the first things they'll show you is, here is this shape. We're going to call this E, and they don't explain what we've been doing the last 6 modules as to what goes into making an E chord. That's why we're doing this now. Okay, so glance on the right side of page 62. You got that big old diagram that's now in a vertical orientation with the numbers indicating which fingers are a recommended fingering. Okay? Keep in mind, when you ever see a chord diagram that has a recommended fingering, it may not be the one you want. It's just a recommended one to try. There's situations where I'll use maybe 3 or 4 different fingerings for a given chord based on what I'm going to do on the guitar. Okay? But the 1, 2, and 3, the way they number is they leave the thumb out. If you've taken piano lessons, they usually teach that the hand is labeled 1 through 5, with the thumb being labeled 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the index finger being number 2. But typically in guitar land, they don't think about the thumb as often, and they say you have 4 fingers, so they label them 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in here, and most of the time when I do it, I go ahead and adhere to guitar 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I make a T for the thumb when it does get used. So when it says 1, I want the index finger on the G sharp. Oh, that's the wrong one. There's the G sharp. I want my middle finger, my second finger, excuse me, on the B, and my ring finger on the E. So there's my, according to that diagram. But if you can see this, you could even swap these 2 fingers if necessary. It'll work just like that. That's, works just as well. It might fit your hand better one way or the other. Or you might be able to use one in one situation where you're trying to go to another chord. It's easier to make that move, or the other one. So there's no right way to do it, as long as you get the right strings down. Okay, but they give you a suggestion. So moving on, looking at page 63, now there are the most commonly used chord shapes that are the easy chords to get to on the guitar. Okay, so there's been a question, kind of recurring question that's gone through the course as to why 88 Dynamite is by Eddie. And the more you mess around with these chord shapes, the more you'll realize that they're really pretty easy in comparison to all the other possible chords to grab a hold of those chord shapes based on the way the human hand is built and how to grab the notes that you need in order to make it work. Okay, so that's why we have 88 Dynamite. It makes basically these chords right there easy. Okay, there's obviously other chords we want to make. The other chords take a little more complexity and a little bit harder to make, which we're going to get to. But notice the first one is the first in the top left is the E chord that we just created. The next one is the A chord. But I want you to see something. At the top of that diagram, on the far left, at the top, you see an X. The X means don't play that string at all. Okay? The O means you're going to play the string open. And if there's neither an X or an O, there ought to be a little finger indicator to fret it. So you'll notice on all of these diagrams, and any diagram you see should have either an X on the string to not play, an O on the string to play it open, or on that string somewhere should be an indicator where your finger ought to go to fret it. Okay? So when I go to play that A chord, 1, 2, and 3, the 1 is on the D string at the 2nd fret. So here's D string, 2nd fret, boom. The 2 is on the G string, 2nd fret, that's an A. And the 3 is on a C sharp, making our A major chord right there. And you'll notice that of the 8 chords we have there, 7 of them you wrote out at the bottom of quiz 5 and 6. So if you're thinking, what are the pitches of that D minor again? I think we wrote them out in the bottom of quiz 5 and 6 if you want to check them out. Okay? So these shapes correspond to the notes that are needed to make those chords. These are the easy ones. But if I make an A major chord, and I don't want an altered bass, I want a straight A major, I'll play this like the shape shows, but I'll specifically not play the E string that's on the top. If I do, that would be an A altered bass. It would be an A chord with an E in the bass. So for this moment, I don't want that. I just want a straight A chord. So I'm going to not pluck that string, and I'm going to start at the A and only do 5 strings. There's my A chord with the root like it should be. Does that make sense? Sort of, kind of. Way too much sense. Awesome, we're way past this. We're going to keep trucking. Let's look at the D chord. D chord shape on this diagram, there's lots of ways of playing D. As if you did your bonus exercise from the homework, you found out there's lots of ways of creating triads on the fretboard. But the easy one, the first one, that you can start off with D is not playing these top two strings at all, making the open D string be your bottom note, your lowest pitch. So that's why you got two X's on these two guys. You got an O on the D string, and then you got the fret making this shape right here. And the D chord. D, F sharp, and A. Open D, G at the fret, second fret, D at the third fret, excuse me, B string at the third fret makes a D, and our F sharp is on the bottom of the voicing, top of the chord. Second fret of the E string is F sharp. I could play the fifth string and it'd be a D with an A in the bass. That makes sense? So what's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? What's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? Flat the third. You flat the third. Okay, in an E major chord, what note is the third? Fourth half step above E, G sharp, right? So in an E major chord, the third is G major. If we want to make it an E minor chord, we want to take the G sharp and flatten it. With me so far? E major, E, G sharp, and B. We want to make it minor, we want to flatten the third. So we're going to make it a G natural. This setup with the 88 Dynamite makes it real easy to go from this shape of E major, where my index finger is pulling my G sharp down, and it's the only 3 in my voicing. It's the only third in my voice. Everything else is a E or a B. There's only one G something. My index finger is making it happen right here with G sharp. So if I want to make this a minor, it's as simple as lifting up my index finger, letting this G become G natural. Now I got E minor. And you can see that in the second row on the far left, the E minor shape looks suspiciously like the E shape missing a finger, which in itself is suspicious. And for all of you on the internet that don't have all 10 of your fingers, I so apologize if I just offended you. Feel free to write. So by the same token, at the A major chord, we've got the 1, 2, and 3, just like that. But the third of the chord, which is C sharp, is being handled by my ring finger here on the B string. They're the only C sharp that I have. So if I want to make it minor, I take that C sharp down a half step, and I have to swap my fingers around because I want to grab that right there. So I move my fingers to grab those two and let my index finger come down and hit A natural, and that's where you see, C natural, and now you got the shape of the A minor chord. Feel free to rewind on the video because I said it wrong. Again, with that A minor chord, I'm not playing the E string, it's X'd. I'm playing the A open. I've got these two guys fretted, and then the fret comes back a notch over here to get the C A minor. Look at A major and compare it to A minor. Only one minor difference, pun intended. Same thing with D major shape. Here's my D major shape. On the bottom, A, D, and F sharp. This note right here, that's my F sharp. It's the only 3 represented. So if I want to make it minor, I got to take that guy south a half step. Taking this guy south would be this way. Excuse me. So now I want to keep these guys here. Here's my minor chord. D minor. And of course, if you'll glance at the C or the G majors that are represented, those are the other 2 shapes that are really very easy to create on a guitar. Now, any questions, and I would love a question from somebody who's been playing guitar for a while, who knew all these shapes, but didn't know what's going on underneath. But if you've got any other question, that's fine too. Any questions at all? Sudai.
I don't know. Is it hard not to play those top 2 strings?
She has a great question. She says she doesn't play guitar at all. Is it hard to not play those 2 strings while they're strumming? And it's just a technique thing. At the beginning, you'll accidentally hit it a bunch, and over time, you'll start instinctively knowing, oh, when I play this chord, I only grab the bottom 4 strings. Sometimes you'll mess up and knock them accidentally, and that's not good. But so is it hard? It's as hard as you're willing to practice to not do it, you know? So that's a great question. There's already candy at the table, so I've kind of bypassed the whole throwing it thing, and maybe that's probably safer. Insurance companies are happier about that. Let's move on to the next page. 64. Now here's a couple of other, page 64, here's a couple of other guitar-oriented fretboard things that I want to unpack for you. All of the previous chords we've used so far used 1 or more open strings. Okay? This will give it a more ringing sound. But these chords also would only use 3 fingers max. If you go back and look at the prior page, you only had 3 fingers being used. Okay. But you can also create chords with more fingers and with all frets down, as in no open strings. So let's look at B minor for a second. There's a lot of ways of playing an A chord for all of you who did the bonus exercise homework from last week, right? There's an almost infinite way of playing an A triad on the fretboard. There's all these kinds of possibilities. This is one way of playing a B minor. You take guitar lessons, they might show you another one first. But here's one. So B minor has what notes in it? And let's walk through. B major scale, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp. Let's stop there. So the 1, 3, 5 would be B, D sharp, and F sharp. So if we want to make it a minor, we're going to take the D sharp on the 3, knock it down a half step to D natural. So the notes in our B minor, and you can write this out there if you want to next to it, the notes in a B minor chord are B, D, and F sharp. So we want to make a chord that's B, D, and F sharp on the fretboard. The easiest way to start with that is bypass both the Eddie and the 8 strings, the E and A string, okay, and start on the D string, going up 1, 2, 3, 4 frets. 4 half steps above D is an F sharp. Okay? So our bottom pitch, our lowest pitch, is going to be F sharp. So one could look at this as a B minor with an F sharp in the bass. Right? So I'll use my ring finger, as it indicates there, the number 3, on that F sharp. Right below it, on the next string down, I'll use my pinky, or the 4, to grab a B natural on the G string. Everybody with me so far? Are the letters going crazy, or are you following me? Okay, stay with me, stay with me. The next one down, as you'll see on the diagram, is the 2, or the middle finger, is going to be on a D of the B string. The 3rd fret of the B string makes a D. So I've already got the triad right there. F sharp, E. It just happens that the F sharp's on the bottom instead of the B, right? And then my index finger can grab the F sharp here on the 2nd fret. Okay? So if I just do the bottom 3 strings, I got B, F sharp, there's my minor triad. But it's real easy to grab one more string down with my finger and make a B minor with an F sharp on the bottom, make a little fuller voicing. With me so far? Let's take a look at F major. Everybody knows the F major scale is F, G, A, B, flat, C, D, E. And the 1, 3, and 5 of the F major scale would be F, A, and C. Now, when you talk all at once, it kind of overloads the mic, so calm it down just a notch, please. Just kidding. Let's all say it together. F, A, and C. Okay, so write that down if you want to. We're going to put this on the fretboard, F, A, and C. There is an open A string right here, 8 dynamite. So we could use this guy open if we wanted to, but let's make a chord where F is on the bottom. In which case we could, just for the sake of this particular diagram, let's make F and build it from the higher pitch strings on down. An E string up here could be fretted at 1 fret at the half step to make it F natural. The B string can go up a half step to make a C natural. So there's an F and C. And then the G string can go up 2 frets or a whole step to make an A. So that right there, these 2 guys, notice I was flattening this finger. I should have done that now because it's going to come into play later. But if I go, how is this one? Yeah, he's doing both 1 and 1 if you see on the diagram. So I'm flattening my finger to grab both strings. A here, and another F down there. And there's my F major triad. Got 2 Fs in there. There's a little doubling going on. Okay? And then this last one I want to show a little bit different thing, because this isn't something they always teach on day 1 of guitar lessons, but to me it's a huge deal. Let's say we want a D chord, a D major triad. We want to put an F sharp in the bass. Now, if you want to glance for reference at the page before, the D major triad only used those bottom 4 strings, had the open D as the lowest pitch, and made this shape with the fingers to make the D major triad. Right there, the way I'm playing that, the D is on the bottom. It's a root position chord. I could also then strike all 5 strings here with this guy being my bottom one, 88, and then it becomes a D over A. But everybody who says their hand's not big enough They just haven't stretched it out enough, because I'm pretty sure I've seen everybody, even with small hands, have been able to stretch their hands out to make their thumb grab the F sharp right here. Now, we don't want a straight E because that's not part of our triad, right? Our triad is D, F sharp, and A. F sharp can be grabbed right there with my thumb, and thus, if somebody wants to play D over F sharp, boom, I grab it with my thumb, I fret it there. Now, common mistake a lot of folks make that play bass and guitar in worship bands. They see the chord that says D over F sharp, and the guitar players mark out the F sharp and say that doesn't apply to me. And the bass players mark out the D and say that doesn't apply to me. This is not making music, this is trying to connect the dots. A musician wants to know the whole entire harmony of what's going on. Because at the beginning of the day, I can teach a chimpanzee to create the shapes on the page, and when the page says to make the shape. But a musician is creating sound. A musician is an artist. And so a musician says, I've got all kinds of voicings available to me. I've got all possible variations of bass lines available to me, so I need to know the overall harmony and chord so that I know what those options are and how they're going to interact. So if I'm a bass player and I'm playing the F sharp, if I know that the chord over is D over F sharp, I know that maybe I could do, and I could do a little riff in there because it's part of the D major scale. If it said F sharp minor, I'd still be playing the F sharp as my main note, but that would make me play something different. Because F sharp minor would make me approach it differently as a bass player than D over F sharp. Same thing with the guitar player. You won't have any idea how many keyboard players in your life think ill of you. Because at some point it says D over F sharp, and you insist on not playing that bottom note, and the keyboard player is going, those guitar players, they never learn how to do the altered bass right. Okay? There are not too hard ways of grabbing any altered bass that are possible on the fretboard. Learn them, my friends that are playing guitar. One good example, D over F sharp. You heard it here first. Okay? Any questions? Evan Anderson has a question. You're saying the pinky to grab here? Right there. Okay, Evan is suggesting that there's times where you could make the D and make the F sharp on the bottom B right there. I do occasionally, yeah, absolutely, that works. And it's a perfect example of how there's other ways of doing this. Okay, so here's that D chord. Here's the D. If I wanted to make the F sharp be the bottom, another alternative is D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp. My pinky's in a good spot if I've stretched out. For beginning guitar players, it's usually hard to make the pinky do much with stretching because it requires some power, so they don't teach it right off. But technically this is just as valid of a D over F sharp as this. Great point, Evan. Another voicing. This one may be a little lighter. Oh, I'm sorry, I got the music mode. So, going on to the next page. Let's look at the concept of a bar chord. And all the guitar players rolled their eyes, but if you pay attention, you're going to pick up something that you hadn't picked up before. Okay? Now, the concept of the bar chord, I think, is hugely important, especially for non-guitar players to understand. So if you can see that bar chord and do the math of where they are on the fretboard, you can visualize what they're playing. And as a keyboard player or a trumpet player or bass player, you can figure things out a lot better when you understand this concept. So I showed you those easy to play chord types, right? Those are the shapes that are real easy. But what happens if somebody says, I want an F major chord, an F sharp chord? Let's go with that. Okay? An F sharp major chord has F sharp and C sharp in it. And if you're a fan of the fretboard, you're going, huh? Where am I going to get that? There's no open strings involved, right? Eddie A. Dynamite, Goodbye Eddie is not helping me at all at this point. Because F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp is a combination that doesn't naturally land on there, okay? So if you can imagine that when I played an E major chord that we built earlier with this shape right here, if you can remember, there's our E major chord, okay, with that shape. E is only two half steps away from F sharp. If I take the E major chord and I raise the whole chord by a whole step, I'm going to get an F sharp major chord. So these wonderful guitar players back in the day said, well, a lot of the way this E major shape is working is because this nut here is giving me those open strings, E, B, and A. I mean, excuse me, E, B, and another E. right? So let's move this. This is called the nut. Let's move the nut. Let's say we want the E to go up 2 frets to this F sharp. And let's take our index finger and plant it all the way across and pull all of them down. When you're a beginning guitar player and you start doing this, it's kind of hard. When you build up your muscles and build up your calluses, it's not quite so bad, but it takes a lot of pressure to put all 6 down flat like that. So if you try it at home and you haven't done this much, don't be discouraged if at first you can't do it, because it's kind of hard at the beginning. But the more you do it, the more the muscles get built up, the more it's easier to do. So now, as soon as if these strings are all down, now I've kind of transposed. I've moved all of these strings are now a whole step higher when strummed than they were before. Eddie Ate Dynamite, Goodbye Eddie, up a whole step on each of those is now this. Right? So if this is the new nut, if you will, if the nut was over here and now I've made a new nut with my finger, I can take the E major shape and make it be an F sharp chord. Okay? Remember, here was my E major shape. Those two, and then the G sharp down here. So if I'm going to move them up 2 frets, 1, 2, I want those guys there, and I want this down. Now we make an F sharp chord. Does that kind of make sense? Sort of? So to play it, I do this, and I have to change your fingers around, and boom, and you'll see there in the bottom third of page 65, the diagram for an F sharp major chord with an E shape bar chord would look like this. These 3 fingers and the bar are creating the same shape that we saw down here with the E major chord. It's an E shape, but if I bar it, all of a sudden I now have F sharp major. Voila. Right? And for those of you in French, I know I mispronounced that. Don't send me the emails. Okay? F sharp major chord. What happens if I take this exact thing that I'm doing and go up 1 fret? What chord would this be? G major. This was an F sharp major. Up a half step. G major. What if I go up a whole step from there? What would that be called? What would I do to get to A from here? Go up 2 frets, right? So if I take this thing up 2 frets, there's the E shape, but it's A. And the reason I can tell it's A if I'm not a guitar player is I know the E string, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. It's making that shape. That's the bottom note. Do the math, 5 frets, 2 dots, that's an A chord. So starting back at F sharp, if you ever wanted to play a little flamenco music from Spain, and all you Spanish people, please disregard this next part. You go F sharp, major, you go half step, go up another whole step, and take it back down. And go like a right? Thank you very much. Right? So this is an F sharp major chord using an E shape bar. There's other ways of playing an F sharp, but this is the first way that kind of gets easy. Now take the same concept and you can continue to extrapolate it and make any chord you want. Because here's an F, F sharp, A flat. Here's another way of doing C. Here's a B. Here's a B flat. Here's an E flat, and so forth. So you can make almost any major chord just with that E shape. Not some are better than others. Some work better than others. Depends on where you're at on the neck, but you can make any chord if you know that E shape and the bar. Okay? Now there's an alternative. Any questions? That kind of makes sense? Now, we just showed, let me edit here. Boom. Okay, so we just showed the bar shape of E, moving it around, with the E string as our lowest note. So if you flip the page, now we're going to do the same exact concept, but now we're going to use the A shape with our fifth string, the A string, as our lowest note. Same idea. Okay? So remember that A shape where we took these 3 guys right here. 1, 2. That gives us a major triad just with those 3 that I'm fretting. If I circle the whole 5 string, then it gives me an E major with an A on the bottom. If I take the whole thing up 3 frets, A up 3 frets is going to be C. If I take the whole thing up 3 frets and I create a new nut with a bar, that's going to give me C major. So 1, 2, 3, and I do that chord like this. There's the same shape, but I got a bar here. I almost never use this voicing myself when I play, because I find it a little bit weird to get to. I always find other ways to make and see happen than this one, but this technically works. If I want to get a C sharp chord, I stick it up a fret. D, D sharp. So if I got a C here, this is a C major chord using the A shape bar. And I can also get a C major chord, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C. I can make a C major chord using the E shape bar like this. So this is a C major with the E bar shape. This is a C major with the A bar shape. Two different voicings, same three pitches, same chord. So you'll look at the bottom of page 66, the bar chord root finder. So if somebody is making this, let's say 4th fret, and they're making this shape right here, and you go, oh, that's an A shape. So this must be their bottom note. They must be playing A, B flat, B, C, C sharp. That must be a C sharp major chord. Okay? But if they're doing the E shape, you look at the far left, and you go to like the 7th fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7th fret's also the 3rd dot. And they're barring, and they're making an E shape. You know that this B natural note is the root of their chord. A B major chord. Handy dandy bar chord root finder right there. And that, we don't charge extra for the root finder. It's included in the class. I know you guys were worried about that. Did you have a question, Bradley? Are you impressed that I remembered your name finally after 4 weeks? Booyah. Yes, sir. 2 questions.
Okay, so I got you in the root finder for the E.
Yes, sir.
And tell me again, root finder for the A.
Okay, he says he understands the root finder on the E shape, but not necessarily for the A. So on that diagram, the bar chord root finder, the far left column is representing the E string. So if the bar is at that spot on the neck, that's the corresponding note. So if it's the 1st fret, then it's an F chord using the E shape. But using the A shape, you're gonna look at what's in the 2nd column under the A string. So if I make an A shape bar chord and I do it on the 1st fret, I can see the 1st fret right there is A sharp or B flat. That will be a B flat chord. So if I do this, basically, A shape on the 1st fret. Okay? It's convenient that the shape matches the name of the string that it's referencing. Follow-up question from Brett Lee.
Okay, when you're playing, do you use standard tuning like you're showing us today and standard shape or do you use alternate?
Okay, the question is when I'm playing, when you me personally play? Yeah, he's saying when I'm playing, do I use the standard tuning or do I do alternate tunings? And for my own music, 90% of the time I use standard tuning. Every once in a while, I do a couple of oddball tunings for a specific issue. And for those who aren't guitar players, you should probably even ignore the question, to be honest. But basically, the Eddie 8 Dynamite Goodbye Eddie is totally the way you need to start and understand. And you could never vary from that for the rest of your life and make tons and tons of music. And many advanced guitar players never vary. But some guys like to, or gals like to enjoy experimenting with changing Eddie 8 Dynamite to other things. And there's all kinds of other possible shapes then that becomes, possible voicings, possible sounds. So there's an area of exploration there. But if you're just getting started, don't let it distract you. Personally, I don't. But I also started life as a piano player, and I came to guitar late. So that my musical goals on guitar just don't need any non-standard tunings. Once in a while, I drop the D down, which is a real common one they call drop D, where you take the Eddie, the first Eddie, drop it down a whole step, and then when you do that, if you play a D shape, and this note is an A, and now this string has become a D, but I pitch it down and make it lower, it just makes a bottom fuller note, right? But it also changes some of the other shapes that I'd have to make. And I think I've got enough music things going on to try to not have to remember all these new shapes for the other tuning. But I love the guys that mess with non-standard tuning. It's beautiful. Great question. Candy's in front of you. Moving on to page 67. Now, this is a really good one for you non-guitar players to check out. And I make a very specific statement here that I think is very important because there's a lot of confusion over this. A capo is a device that you put on the neck to shorten the playable length of the string. Okay? This works a whole lot like the bar we just learned about in the last couple of pages. Only now your finger doesn't have to work so hard. Because instead of making the bar an E shape here to make F sharp major, we take a device that does the work for our fingers for us, boom, and now we just have to make an E shape. And there's our F sharp major chord. So this is called a capo, which I believe is an Italian word, but I could be wrong, and feel free to email me once you've gone to Wikipedia and found out that it doesn't actually say where the word comes from, because I checked. Anyway, F sharp major chord, using the E shape, but I'm now capoing at the 2nd fret. Okay? Now, there are some people who say, for the beginner, this is really good, because you don't have to learn all those really weird, difficult-to-play chords, and I agree with them. The capo is a great tool for the beginner. Some people get this idea that capos are a crutch. And I think when used at the beginning to learn, it's a valuable tool. But experienced musicians use the capo all the time to get alternate tunings and to play things that otherwise could not be played. So let me give you an example. There's this song by Lyle Lovett, and it's a secular song, so you don't want to go listen to it because it might taint your spirit. I was just kidding. The sarcasm was not as evident, okay? But Lyle Lovett has this song that he uses a G major chord shape, but he does it with the capo at the 5th fret. So what's G up 5 half steps? C is the right answer. G up 5 half steps is G up a perfect 4th. So if I have the capo up 5 half steps and I make a G shape, which if the one I'm doing isn't familiar to you, it's on page whatever 63 back there. So this is a C chord. I'm playing it with a G shape. Okay? So he's got this tune that goes. What's cool about the song is this little, like this. You have that little mournful kind of sad sound with those top two. Oh, it's a major chord. You can't make it mournful or sad. Of course you can, okay? But it's really dependent on that. Now, if I said, well, it's C. I know how to play C without a capo. I can play C without a capo down here. Boom. This is also a shape that we didn't go over, but it's in your notes. C major shape. But if I try to do the same thing, I can kind of do it, but it doesn't have the same sound. That's particular voicing. I can't do this. It doesn't work. But to make that specific sound, I need a capo to do. And so forth. So the capo is a very valuable tool for the advanced musician, and the idea that it's the crutch is pretty silly, unless you are using it as a crutch, in which case, get rid of your capo and go learn your bar chords and other chord shapes, okay? Don't let it be a crutch, but it doesn't have. Now, if you are not playing guitar before, is this bar chord thing making sense? And is the capo thing kind of making sense, where they're, in both cases, they're sort of moving the nut around in order to make shapes that are easily playable? Yeah? Okay, then final topic, I think, is the difference between picking and strumming. Now, at the bottom of page 67, the last half, this might seem obvious to you, but I want to go ahead and throw it out just in case. So I can strum a D chord shape. It's the same shape we've been using all evening. D chord shape where I'm not going to do these top two strings, or if I do, it's an accident, and Sue Dye can give me a dirty look because she brought it up earlier. Okay, but if I do a D open string, A, B, there's my D major triad, I can strum it. Sus4. Copy 4 Christian phrases, and I've got a hit worship song, right? Okay? Yeah, exactly. Okay? But that's called strumming, where I'm using one motion to grab several strings at once. Okay? But picking is typically going to grab 1, maybe 2 or 3 strings in something like this. I can do the same thing, but now each individual finger is grabbing a different string. And I can do, there's my D major, my sus4. If I let it go, there's a sus2. Okay? So there's a James. Okay? So that's called finger picking, or plucking. So I'm only plucking 1 string at a time. I can also maybe pluck 2 at a time. So if I can. So I've got 4 4 strings going, but you hear me going 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, and the I'm actually grabbing 2 strings at once. So plucking is not just 1 string at a time, but it's typically 1, 2, or 3 maybe. Making sense? Plucking versus strumming. Okay? And I think if you look at the next page, fretboard chart creation practice sheet, what I'd love for you to do is at home on your own time to take this same sheet right here and randomly pick a note of any of the 13 that we've been dealing with. Let's call it A flat. Find a way of playing it without a bar, without a capo. How do you make an A flat triad? Boom. Pull it out there. Then go buy or look on the internet, because there's lots of places on the internet, a reference that would show you what all the guitar chords are and see how close you got. You'll probably get it right if you do, if you're careful about it and think about it. Randomly pick a note, randomly pick one of our 6 triad shapes, triad qualities, and figure out a way to play it on the guitar. Do this over and over. Try different ones. This is another one of those where you're going to erase it and start over and spend plenty of time creating chords on the fretboard. Yeah? Okay, so this concludes Module 7, and everybody said tritone. Yes. Thank you.